The laughter hit me first, sharp and cruel, cutting through the low murmur of the restaurant like a knife through silk. I stood frozen in the doorway of Marcello's, the upscale Italian place where my wife had told me she was having dinner with her book club. The reservation had been under her name, and I'd come to surprise her with the necklace I'd been saving up for our 10th anniversary gift, 2 months early, because I couldn't wait to see her face light up. But Victoria wasn't with her book club. She was sitting at a corner table with 3 other women I recognized from the country club, the same women who'd always looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of their designer shoes. And she was telling them a story that made them laugh so hard one of them had to dab at her eyes with a napkin. And then he actually thought he could make partner at some tech startup, Victoria said, her voice dripping with the kind of contempt I'd never heard directed at me before. A startup? At 38 years old, like we're living in some Silicon Valley fantasy. My hand tightened around the small jewelry box in my coat pocket. But Victoria, doesn't he work at that consulting firm? One of the women asked Delilah. I thought her name was. That's respectable enough. Respectable for someone with no real ambition, sure. Victoria took a sip of wine, and even from the doorway, I could see the casual cruelty in the gesture. My father was right about him. He's comfortable being mediocre. He'll never be the kind of man who builds empires. He'll just exist, collecting a paycheck, coming home to his little hobbies, completely satisfied with being ordinary. The words felt like physical blows, each one landing with precision, targeting every insecurity I'd ever had about myself. So why stay married to him? Another woman asked. Victoria shrugged, twirling her wine glass. Security. The house is in both our names. He's reliable, predictable. He'll never leave me. Never surprise me with anything inconvenient. And honestly, the bar is so low that when I do meet someone with actual ambition, she paused meaningfully. Well, let's just say I have options. The women laughed again, and I felt something inside me crack, not break crack, like ice on a frozen lake. The surface fracturing in slow motion, revealing the dark water beneath. I didn't storm in, didn't make a scene. Didn't confront her in front of her friends with tears and accusations the way she probably expected I would if I ever found out. Instead, I turned around and walked out of Marcello's with the same measured steps I'd walked in with. The valet brought my car a 3-year-old sedan that Victoria frequently complained wasn't impressive enough for her tastes. I tipped him, got behind the wheel, and drove home to the house we'd bought together 7 years ago, and I started planning. My name is Connor Hayes, and this is the story of how my wife's contempt became the catalyst for the most satisfying reversal of my life. Because what Victoria didn't know, what nobody knew except me, was that the mediocre man she'd just mocked in front of her friends had been secretly building something extraordinary. I'd just been waiting for the right moment to reveal it. She'd given me that moment, and she had no idea what was coming. I'd met Victoria Ashcroft 9 years earlier at a corporate mixer I'd been dragged to by my then boss. I was 29, she was 27. And she'd been the most beautiful woman in the room, tall, blonde, with the kind of effortless elegance that came from growing up with money. She'd approached me, not the other way around. Later, she'd tell people she'd been drawn to my intelligence, my quiet confidence. The truth, I realized now, was that she'd been drawn to my potential, to what she thought I could become with the right motivation, her motivation. We dated for a year before I proposed. Her father, Preston Ashcroft III, had made it clear he thought she was marrying beneath her station. He owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across 3 states and had expected his only daughter to marry someone from their social circle, someone with family, money, connections, ambition that matched her pedigree. I was none of those things. I was a consultant at a mid-sized firm, the son of a high school teacher and a nurse. I'd gone to state school on scholarships, not prestigious private universities. I drove a practical car and lived in a modest apartment. But Victoria had insisted I was different, that she loved me for who I was, not what I came from, that her father would see my worth eventually. I'd believed her. God, I'd believed every word. We'd gotten married at the country club, a lavish affair that her parents paid for because my family certainly couldn't afford it. I'd felt out of place the entire day, surrounded by people who'd inherited their wealth rather than earned it. But Victoria had held my hand and told me I belonged there, belonged with her. The first few years had been good. We'd bought the house, a beautiful 4-bedroom in a neighborhood I'd never thought I could afford, though Victoria had made it clear it was smaller than what she'd grown up with. I'd been promoted to senior consultant at my firm. We'd talked about starting a family someday. But slowly, subtly, things had started to change. Victoria had begun comparing me to her friends' husbands. Marcus, who'd just made partner at his law firm. Bradley, who'd started his own hedge fund. Tyler, who'd sold his tech company for 8 figures. "Don't you want more?" she'd asked one night, about 2 years into our marriage. "Don't you want to be someone important?" "I'm happy with what we have," I'd said, which had been true at the time. "Happy isn't enough," she'd replied. And I'd seen something flicker in her eyes. Disappointment, frustration, maybe even disgust. From that point on, she'd started pushing, suggesting I look for jobs at more prestigious firms, asking why I wasn't networking more aggressively, hinting that maybe I should consider an MBA from a top-tier school. Never mind that we couldn't afford it, and I'd already been working 60-hour weeks. I'd tried to meet her expectations, applied for positions I wasn't excited about, attended networking events where I felt like an imposter, smiled through dinners with her friends where I was always the least successful person at the table. But it was never enough. I was never enough. 6 months ago, things had gotten worse. Victoria had stopped being subtle about her disappointment. She'd started making cutting remarks about my salary, my car, my hobbies. She'd begun staying out later with friends, coming home smelling like expensive wine and someone else's cologne. I'd suspected she was having an affair, maybe multiple affairs, but I'd been too afraid to confirm it, too afraid of what I'd have to do if I knew for certain. Then, 3 months ago, everything had changed. I'd been at work, stuck in a meeting that should have ended an hour earlier, when my phone had buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Is this Connor Hayes? We need to talk about Victoria." I'd stepped out of the meeting, pulse racing, and called the number. A woman's voice had answered, professional, efficient, slightly apologetic. "Mr. Hayes, my name is Simone Carter. I'm a private investigator. I was hired by someone to follow your wife. And, well, I thought you should know what I found." My blood had gone cold. "Who hired you?" "I can't disclose that. But whoever it was wanted proof of your wife's extramarital activities. I've been watching her for 6 weeks. I have photographs, video, documented evidence of her meeting with at least 3 different men at various hotels. I'm calling you because my client asked me to approach you with an offer." "What kind of offer?" "They'll give you all the evidence I've collected, free of charge, no strings attached. They just thought you deserved to know the truth." I'd met Simone at a coffee shop the next day. She'd handed me a flash drive containing months of surveillance. Photos of Victoria entering hotels with men I didn't recognize. Videos of her laughing and flirting in restaurants. Receipts from expensive dinners charged to credit cards I didn't know she had. The evidence was damning and thorough. More than enough for a divorce attorney to build a case around. "Who hired you?" I'd asked again. Simone had smiled sadly. "Someone who knows what it's like to be underestimated. That's all I can tell you." I'd thanked her, taken the flash drive home, and spent the entire night going through every file. Every photo felt like a dagger to the chest. Every video confirmed what I'd been too afraid to face. My wife didn't love me. Maybe she never had. She'd married potential, and when I didn't live up to her expectations, she'd started looking elsewhere. But as the sun had come up and I'd finished reviewing all the evidence, something strange had happened. The pain had crystallized into something else. Something colder, clearer, determination. Because 3 months before Simone had contacted me, I'd done something Victoria didn't know about. Something I'd been keeping secret because I'd wanted it to be a surprise, a gift to prove I wasn't as unambitious as she'd started treating me. I'd been building a company. The company had started as a side project, something I'd worked on in the evenings and weekends when Victoria was out with friends or at the gym or doing whatever she did that kept her away from home. It was a software platform designed to help small and mid-sized companies streamline their consulting operations. I'd spent years at my consulting firm watching clients struggle with inefficient systems, and I'd realized there was a massive market gap for software that could solve these problems without requiring expensive consultants or complex implementations. I'd built the first prototype myself, teaching myself to code through online courses and developer forums. It had taken me 8 months to create something functional. Another 4 months to refine it into something I could actually show to potential clients. I'd launched it quietly 6 months ago, the same time Victoria had started becoming openly contemptuous of my lack of ambition. I'd called it Streamline OS, kept it under my name only, and started reaching out to small businesses in our area. The response had been immediate and overwhelming. Within 2 months, I'd signed 15 clients. Within 4 months, 50. The monthly recurring revenue had started at $3,000 and had grown exponentially. By the time Simone had contacted me 3 months ago, Streamline OS was generating $45,000 in monthly revenue. Now, 3 months later, that number had climbed to $127,000 per month. I'd been approached by venture capital firms interested in investing. Tech blogs had started writing about the stealth startup disrupting the consulting software space. Industry analysts were calling Streamline OS the future of operational efficiency for mid-market companies. And Victoria had no idea any of it existed. I'd kept it completely separate from our personal life. Used a business bank account she didn't know about. Met with clients and investors during lunch breaks or early mornings. Filed the company under my name only, with a business address at a co-working space across town. I'd been planning to surprise her, to reveal on our 10th anniversary that her unambitious husband had actually built a company that was being valued at over $10 million by interested investors. I'd imagined her face when I told her. The shock, the pride, the realization that she'd been wrong about me. I'd fantasized about proving to her father that I was more than he'd thought, about showing her friends that I wasn't the mediocre man they assumed I was. But after seeing those surveillance photos, after hearing her mock me at Marcello's, I'd realized something important. I didn't want to prove anything to Victoria anymore. I wanted her to understand what she'd lost, so I'd started planning something different, something that would be far more satisfying than simply revealing I'd been successful all along. I was going to hire my wife, not as a partner, not as an equal, as an employee. The same woman who'd spent years making me feel small for my lack of ambition was going to work for the company I'd built. She was going to report to me, take orders from me, serve coffee to clients in meetings I ran. And she was going to have no choice but to accept it, because by the time I was done restructuring our finances and positioning my pieces, she'd need the job. It was poetic. It was cruel. It was absolutely perfect. The planning had taken precision and patience, 2 qualities Victoria had always dismissed in me as lack of ambition, rather than recognizing them as strategic thinking. First, I'd met with a divorce attorney. Not just any attorney, but the best in the city, a woman named Catherine Brennan who had a reputation for being ruthless in protecting her clients' interests. I need to be smart about this, I'd told her during our initial consultation. My wife has been having affairs. I have proof. But before I file for divorce, I need to protect my assets. Catherine had reviewed the evidence from Simone, then looked at me with something like approval. You've been building a company in secret? Yes. Streamline OS. It's worth about $10 million right now, potentially much more if I take the venture capital funding I've been offered. And it's entirely in your name? No marital funds used to build it? Entirely mine. I built it on my own time, used my own money from savings I'd had before the marriage. I've been meticulous about keeping it separate. Catherine had smiled. That's going to make this much easier. In this state, assets created during marriage are typically considered marital property. But if you can prove you built this entirely independently with premarital assets and your own labor, we can argue it should be excluded from any settlement. Can we do better than that? What do you mean? I mean, can we position things so that when we divorce, she actually needs something from me? Needs a job, specifically? Catherine had leaned back in her chair, studying me with new interest. You want to hire your ex-wife? I want her to understand what she threw away. I want her to see, every single day, what I built while she was out there cheating on me and telling people I was mediocre. That's ambitious, Catherine had said, and I'd caught the irony in her voice. It's also potentially brilliant. Here's what we'll need to do. Over the next hour, she'd laid out a strategy that was both elegant and devastating. First, we'd quietly restructure our shared finances. The house was in both our names, but I'd been the one making the mortgage payments from my consulting salary. Catherine had found a way to document that the equity was primarily mine. Second, we'd identify all of Victoria's personal debt credit cards, personal loans, the car lease in her name. Turned out she'd been spending far more than I'd realized, racking up over $80,000 in debt I'd known nothing about. Third, we'd time the divorce filing for maximum impact, not immediately after I discovered the affairs, but later, after I'd had time to position Streamline OS for a major growth phase that would coincide with her needing employment. "She's not going to take this well," Catherine had warned. "When she realizes you've been 10 steps ahead of her this whole time, she's going to be furious." "Good," I'd replied. "She should be. She spent years making me feel inadequate. It's time she understood exactly who she was married to." The second phase of planning had involved Streamline OS itself. I'd accelerated the company's growth, taking meetings with larger clients, finally accepting some of that venture capital funding $5 million that valued the company at $20 million. I'd used the funding to hire a proper team: developers, salespeople, a marketing manager. I'd rented real office space, a beautiful modern building in the city's tech district, with floor-to-ceiling windows and all the startup amenities that Victoria's friends would recognize as successful. I'd also created a position, executive assistant to the CEO, entry level, despite the fancy title. Responsibilities included managing my calendar, greeting clients, preparing meeting materials, and yes, serving coffee during important meetings. The salary was $42,000 a year. Not terrible for an entry-level position, but a massive step down from the lifestyle Victoria was accustomed to. And then I'd waited. I'd waited for the right moment to file for divorce. The right moment to reveal Streamline OS publicly. The right moment for all the pieces to fall into place. That moment had come 2 weeks ago, on a Wednesday morning. Victoria had been in the bathroom getting ready for another book club meeting, which I now knew was actually a lunch date with one of her affair partners, a real estate developer named Bradley Whitmore, who she'd been seeing for at least 4 months. I'd walked into the bedroom where she was putting on makeup and said, very calmly, "I'm filing for divorce." She'd frozen, mascara wand halfway to her eye. "What?" "I'm divorcing you, Victoria. I've already filed the papers. You'll be served later today." "Connor, what are you talking about? Where's this coming from?" I'd almost laughed at her performance. The shocked innocence. The confused hurt. She was good at pretending. "I know about Bradley," I'd said, "and Marcus, and Tyler. I know about all of them." Her face had gone pale, then red. "You're being ridiculous." "I don't know what you think you know I have. Photos, Victoria, videos, receipts, a private investigator's full report. I know everything." She'd set down the mascara, and I'd watched her expression shift from denial to calculation. "Fine. You caught me. But Connor, we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can." "No, we can't. I don't want to work through this. I want a divorce." "You can't afford to divorce me," she'd said. And there was the contempt again, no longer hidden. "The house, the expenses, the settlement. I'll demand you're a consultant, Connor. You make decent money, but not enough to walk away from me cleanly." "We'll see," I'd replied. And then I'd left for work. She'd been served with the papers that afternoon, and based on the 17 increasingly frantic text messages she'd sent me, she'd also been served with something else. Catherine's financial disclosure requests that made it clear I knew about her secret credit card debt and that I would be arguing for her to be responsible for it in the divorce. That had been 2 weeks ago. Now, today, I was about to execute the final phase of my plan. The press release went out at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. Streamline OS, the rapidly growing consulting software platform, announces $20 million series, a funding round led by Pinnacle Ventures. Within an hour, it was picked up by every major tech blog and business publication. TechCrunch ran a feature. Forbes published an interview with me that their reporter had conducted 2 weeks earlier under embargo. The local business journal put my photo on their website with the headline, "Local Entrepreneur Builds $20M Company in Stealth Mode." My phone started ringing at 9:15 a.m. and didn't stop for the next 3 hours. Former colleagues from the consulting firm, business school classmates I hadn't talked to in years. Reporters requesting interviews, more venture capital firms wanting to discuss future funding rounds. At 10:30 a.m., I got the text I'd been waiting for. From Victoria, "We need to talk. Now." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I went into the conference room at Streamline OS's new office, where my entire team, all 15 of them now, were waiting for the company all-hands meeting I'd scheduled. "First, I want to thank all of you for believing in this vision," I said, looking around at the faces of people who'd taken a chance on an unknown company. 6 months ago, Streamline OS was just me and a prototype. Today, We're a $20 million company with 50 enterprise clients and a path to profitability. That's because of your hard work." They applauded, and I felt a surge of pride. This was real. I'd built something real, something meaningful, something that mattered. Second, I want to address some personal news that some of you may have heard about. I'm going through a divorce. It's been difficult, but it's also given me clarity about what I want this company to represent. I started Streamline OS because I was tired of being overlooked, tired of watching talented people get lost in inefficient systems. I want this company to be a place where merit matters more than connections, where hard work and intelligence are valued over pedigree. More applause. I could see in their faces that they understood what I was really saying, that I'd been underestimated too. And look where that had gotten me. Finally, I'm announcing some new positions we're hiring for as we scale, including an executive assistant role. If anyone has referrals, please send them to HR. After the meeting, I finally checked my phone. 23 missed calls from Victoria, 14 text messages, each one more desperate than the last. "Connor, we need to talk about this company." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I don't understand. You built a $20 million company? How?" "Everyone is calling me asking about your success. I look like a fool. We're still married. I have rights to this company. Call me back. Now." I didn't call. Instead, I sent a single text. "Have your attorney contact Catherine Brennan." All communication about the divorce goes through her. My phone rang immediately. I declined the call. It rang again, declined again, then a different number. Her father, Preston Ashcroft. I let that one go to voicemail too. At lunch, I met with Catherine at a quiet restaurant downtown. "She's panicking," Catherine reported, looking amused. "Her attorney called me 3 times this morning. They want to negotiate a settlement that includes a significant portion of Streamline OS's value. Can they do that? They can try. But we have a strong case that you built this company entirely independently. You used premarital savings, your own time outside of work hours. No shared resources. The fact that you kept it secret is actually working in your favor. It proves you weren't using marital assets or time. What's she offering? Nothing yet. She's demanding, not offering. Wants 50% of the company's current valuation, plus the house, plus spousal support." I laughed. "She's delusional. She's desperate. Connor, your wife just realized she married someone worth tens of millions of dollars and is about to lose access to all of it. She's going to fight hard. Let her fight. We have proof of her affairs. We have documentation of her debt. We have everything we need to win. We do. But I'm obligated to tell you this could get ugly. She could try to make claims about your character, about hidden assets, about anything she can think of to delay or improve her position. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared for whatever comes. Catherine, I didn't do this to be cruel. I did this to protect myself from someone who'd been systematically destroying my self-worth for years. If she wants to fight, we'll fight, but she's not getting Streamline OS. Good. Then let's discuss the next phase. You mentioned wanting to offer her a job? I do, but not yet. First, I want her to feel what it's like to actually need something from me. Let the divorce proceedings go for a few months. Let her realize she's going to walk away from this marriage with far less than she expected. Then, when she's desperate, when she's burning through whatever money she has access to, that's when I'll make the offer. Catherine had looked at me with something between admiration and concern. You've thought this through. I've had 3 months to think about nothing else. That evening, I attended a networking event at the tech incubator downtown, the kind of event I'd have been uncomfortable at a year ago, feeling like an imposter among successful entrepreneurs. Now I was one of them. People wanted to talk to me, wanted to know my story, wanted to learn how I'd built Streamline OS in stealth mode. I heard you're going through a divorce, one entrepreneur said. A woman who'd sold her company for $50 million the year before. That must be tough timing. Actually, the timing is perfect, I replied. Sometimes you need to cut loose the people who are holding you back. She'd laughed and clinked her glass against mine. Amen to that. I'd gotten home around 10 p.m. to find Victoria's car in the driveway. She had a key to the house. We were still legally married, after all. But I'd been prepared for this. I changed the locks 3 days ago and hadn't told her. She was sitting on the front steps, looking furious. "You changed the locks," she said when I got out of my car. "The house will be part of the divorce settlement. Until then, I'd prefer you didn't have access. I have a right to be here. We're married. You also have an apartment you've been staying at with Bradley. I'm sure he'd be happy to let you in." Her face flushed. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." I walked past her to unlock the door. "You should go, Victoria. We need to talk about this company. Streamline OS. You built it during our marriage. I have a right to, you have a right to, whatever the court decides you have a right to. Until then, everything goes through our attorneys. Connor, don't be like this. I know I made mistakes, but we can work through them." And now that you're successful, I turned to face her then, and I must have had an expression she'd never seen before, because she'd actually taken a step back. "Now that I'm successful, what? You want to be part of it?" "Victoria, you spent years telling me I wasn't ambitious enough, telling your friends I was mediocre, comparing me to other men who you deemed more worthy of your time. You don't get to suddenly decide I'm worth your attention now that there's money involved. That's not fair. I supported you, you tolerated me. There's a difference, and now you're going to have to live with the consequences of treating me like I was less than I am." I'd gone inside and closed the door, locked it, stood there in the dark hallway of the house we'd bought together, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Control. The satisfaction of knowing I'd outplayed someone who thought I was too stupid to even realize I was being played. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I hope you're enjoying your victory." "You earned it," S. Simone, the private investigator. The mysterious person who'd hired her was still anonymous, but I was beginning to have my suspicions about who it might be. I texted back, "Thank you. I couldn't have done this without you. You did this yourself. I just gave you information. What you did with it, that was all you." I looked around the empty house and allowed myself a small smile. Victoria had called me unambitious, had told her friends I'd never be someone who built empires. She'd been spectacularly wrong. And soon, she was going to understand just how wrong. The divorce proceedings dragged through the summer like a slow-motion car crash. Every week brought new demands from Victoria's attorney, each one more desperate than the last. They wanted half of Streamline OS's valuation denied based on the premarital assets and independent development argument. They wanted the house denied because I'd been making all the payments and could prove it. They wanted spousal support countered by evidence of her affairs and her secret spending that had racked up $80,000 in personal debt. With each denial, each counterargument, I could feel Victoria's position weakening. Catherine was brilliant, methodical, and utterly ruthless in protecting my interests. "She's running out of options," Catherine told me during one of our weekly meetings in July. "Her attorney knows the affair evidence is damning. The debt proves she was living beyond her means. And the fact that you built Streamline OS entirely independently means she has no legal claim to it." "What's her position now?" "She's asking for a clean split of shared assets, basically the furniture and her car, plus $50,000 to cover her debt and give her a fresh start. And if I say no, then we go to trial, which we'll win, but it'll be expensive and public. Honestly, Connor, from a purely practical standpoint, offering her the $50,000 might be worth it to end this quickly." I thought about it. $50,000 was nothing to me now. Streamline OS was generating over $200,000 in monthly recurring revenue, and the company's valuation had climbed to $25 million after the Series A funding. But this wasn't about money. It was about something else entirely. "Counteroffer," I said. "Tell her I'll give her the $50,000 if she agrees to one condition." "What condition?" "She has to work for it. I'll hire her at Streamline OS as my executive assistant. Salary of $42,000 per year. If she completes one full year of employment, I'll give her an additional $50,000 severance bonus. If she quits before the year is up, she gets nothing extra." Catherine had stared at me for a long moment. "Connor, that's incredibly petty. Is it illegal?" "No, it's a legitimate job offer, but it's obviously designed to humiliate her. She spent years humiliating me. Now, she gets to understand how it feels." "Will you present the offer?" Catherine had sighed, but I'd seen the small smile on her face. "I'll present it, but don't be surprised if she tells you to go to hell." The offer had been presented to Victoria's attorney on a Thursday afternoon. By Friday morning, I had my answer. She'd accepted. Not happily, based on what Catherine told me. Victoria had apparently spent 2 hours arguing with her attorney, insisting there had to be another way. But the math was simple and brutal. She was $80,000 in debt, had no job, and was about to lose access to the lifestyle she'd built. Working for me for a year would give her a salary, benefits, and a $50,000 bonus that could help her start over. She had no choice. Her first day was set for the following Monday. That weekend, I'd done something I rarely allowed myself I'd celebrated. Not publicly, not dramatically, just a quiet dinner at an expensive restaurant with Catherine and my core team from Streamline OS. To poetic justice, Catherine had toasted, raising her glass. To not being underestimated, I'd replied. On Sunday evening, I'd prepared Victoria's workstation personally. A desk in the common area, visible from my office but not private. A company laptop with her email address already set up. victoria.ashcroft@streamlineos.com. A name placard that read Victoria Ashcroft, Executive Assistant to CEO. I'd also drafted her first week's assignments. Managing my calendar, scheduling meetings with clients, preparing presentation materials, and yes, making sure there was fresh coffee before every morning meeting. It was petty. It was calculated. It was exactly what I wanted. Monday morning arrived too quickly, and not quickly enough. I'd gotten to the office at 6 a.m., unable to sleep, too wired with anticipation. My team started filtering in around 8 a.m., most of them knowing that today was the day the CEO's soon-to-be ex-wife started working as his assistant. They were professional about it, but I could see the curiosity in their eyes, the barely suppressed smiles. They'd all heard the story by now, the wife who cheated while her husband was building a multi-million-dollar company. The poetic justice of her now having to work for him. Victoria arrived at exactly 9 a.m., which was when I'd told her to be there. I watched from my office as she walked through the front door of Streamline OS, and I felt something complex twist in my chest. She looked different. Not worse, exactly. Just smaller, somehow. She was wearing business casual clothes that were nice, but not designer. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of the elaborate style she usually preferred. She wasn't wearing the expensive jewelry I'd gotten used to seeing her in. She looked like someone who was trying very hard to appear professional while dying inside. Hannah, our HR manager, greeted her and walked her through the onboarding process. I'd briefed Hannah on the situation she knew about the divorce, knew this was unusual. But I'd asked her to treat Victoria like any other new employee. After an hour of paperwork and orientation, Hannah brought Victoria to my office. "Mr. Hayes, your new executive assistant is ready to start," Hannah said with admirable professionalism. "Thank you, Hannah." I looked at Victoria, who was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Anger, definitely. Humiliation, certainly. But also something else. Maybe respect? Maybe fear? "Victoria, welcome to Streamline OS. Hannah's given you the orientation packet, I assume?" "Yes." Her voice was tight, controlled. "Good. Your primary responsibilities will be managing my calendar, coordinating with clients, and ensuring the executive team has everything they need for meetings. Your desk is outside where you can intercept anyone who needs to speak with me. Questions?" "No." "Excellent. We have a client meeting at 10 a.m. I'll need you to prepare the conference room presentation materials or on the shared drive, and make sure there's coffee for 4 people. The clients prefer medium roast." She stood there for a moment, and I could see her struggling with something. Pride, probably. The urge to tell me to go to hell, to walk out, to refuse to play this role I'd cast her in. But she didn't, because she couldn't afford to. "Of course," she said, finally. "I'll take care of it." She'd turned and walked out of my office, and I'd watched her go, feeling that same complex emotion. Satisfaction? Yes. Vindication? Absolutely. But also something darker. A recognition that I'd become someone who could engineer another person's humiliation, even someone who'd hurt me as badly as Victoria had. Was this who I wanted to be? The question had lingered as I'd prepared for the client meeting. But it had faded when I'd walked into the conference room at 9:55 a.m. and seen Victoria there, standing by the coffee station, having prepared everything exactly as I'd asked. She'd looked up when I entered, and our eyes had met for just a second. In that moment, I'd seen everything. Her recognition of what I'd become, Her understanding of how completely she'd misjudged me. Her realization that the man she'd dismissed as mediocre had orchestrated her downfall with perfect precision. "Coffee?" she'd asked, and her voice had only shaken slightly. "Please," I'd replied. She'd poured it for me, handed me the cup, and I'd thanked her before turning to greet the clients who were just arriving. The meeting had gone perfectly. The clients had been impressed with the presentation, with the software, with Streamline OS's growth trajectory. They'd signed a contract that would add another $15,000 in monthly recurring revenue. Through it all, Victoria had stood to the side, refilling coffee when needed, taking notes when asked, playing the role of professional assistant with admirable composure. Only I had noticed the way her hands shook slightly when she poured the coffee, the way she'd blinked rapidly once or twice, fighting back tears, the way she'd gripped her pen too tightly, knuckles white with tension. Only I had seen the humiliation behind the professional mask, and only I knew that this was just the beginning. The first week of Victoria working at Streamline OS was an exercise in controlled tension. Every interaction between us was loaded with unspoken meaning, every professional exchange carrying the weight of our shared history. On Tuesday, I'd asked her to reschedule a meeting with one of our investors, a simple enough task that she'd completed efficiently. But when she'd come to inform me it was done, I'd seen the barely contained fury in her eyes. "The meeting with Pinnacle Ventures is moved to Thursday at 2 p.m., she'd said, standing in my office doorway. "Thank you, Victoria. Also, I need you to coordinate lunch for the executive team meeting tomorrow. There are 6 of us. Pizza is fine order from Angelo's. They know our usual." She'd nodded stiffly and left without another word. On Wednesday, she'd arranged the lunch perfectly, the right pizzas, delivered on time, set up in the conference room with plates and napkins. She'd even remembered that our CTO, James, was vegetarian and ordered an extra veggie pizza. During the meeting, while I'd been discussing Q3 growth projections with my executive team, Victoria had been in the corner of the room, taking notes, completely silent and professional. But I'd caught her staring at me once, and the look in her eyes had been pure poison. After the meeting, James had approached me. "Is it weird having your ex-wife working here?" "Soon-to-be ex-wife," I'd corrected. "And yes, it's definitely weird, but she needs the job, and I need an assistant. It's practical." "It's also kind of brilliant," James had said with a grin. "I mean, she has to know she messed up, right? She thought you were going nowhere, and now she's literally working for the company you built. That's some karmic justice." It was karmic justice. But it was also starting to feel hollow in ways I hadn't anticipated. Thursday brought the rescheduled meeting with Pinnacle Ventures, the lead investor in our Series A round. Victoria had prepared the conference room flawlessly. Presentation materials printed and bound, water and coffee ready, whiteboard markers available for the brainstorming session we'd planned. The meeting itself had gone exceptionally well. Pinnacle's managing partner, a sharp woman named Angela Morrison. No, I can't use that name. Angela Warren had been impressed with our growth metrics and had hinted at their willingness to lead our Series B round when we were ready. "Connor, Streamline OS is exactly the kind of company we love to back," Angela had said. "You've got strong fundamentals, a clear path to profitability, and a leadership team that clearly knows what they're doing." Throughout the meeting, Victoria had sat off to the side, taking notes, refilling water glasses when needed, playing her role perfectly. But I'd noticed Angela glancing at her occasionally, and I'd wondered if Angela knew the story, if she'd read the articles about the entrepreneur who'd hired his cheating wife as his assistant. After the investors left, Angela had lingered behind. "Can I give you some advice?" Of course. She'd glanced toward where Victoria had been standing, now gone to clean up the conference room. "I know your personal situation. I know why she's working here. And I understand the impulse, believe me. I've been where you are. But Connor, don't let revenge consume you. You've built something extraordinary. Don't let bitterness over a failed marriage become the thing people remember about you." Her words had stung because they'd echoed the doubts I'd been pushing away all week. "I'm not bitter. I'm just holding her accountable. There's a fine line between accountability and cruelty. Just make sure you're on the right side of it." She'd left, and I'd been alone with my thoughts in the empty conference room. Was I being cruel? Or was I simply ensuring Victoria understood the consequences of her choices? I hadn't resolved that question by Friday, when something unexpected happened. Victoria had come into my office at 4 p.m. with a question about the following week's schedule. We'd been talking for maybe 30 seconds when her phone had rung a call from her father, Preston Ashcroft. She'd silenced it quickly, but I'd seen her expression change. Fear, or maybe dread. "Problem?" I'd asked. "No, just my father. He's been calling a lot lately, I can imagine. He must be disappointed that his daughter is working as an assistant instead of living the country club lifestyle he expected." The words had come out harsher than I'd intended. Victoria had flinched like I'd physically struck her. "Yes," she'd said quietly. "He's very disappointed. In me. In this situation. In everything." And suddenly, unexpectedly, I'd felt something shift because I'd heard real pain in her voice. Not the entitled frustration of someone who'd lost access to luxury, but genuine hurt. "Victoria," I'd started, not sure what I wanted to say. "Is there anything else you need, Mr. Hayes?" she'd asked, back to her professional mask. "No, that's all." She'd left, and I'd sat there feeling conflicted. This whole revenge plan had seemed so clear 3 months ago, so justified. Victoria had hurt me, betrayed me, belittled me for years. Making her work for me was poetic justice. But watching her take that phone call from her father, seeing the genuine pain in her eyes, it had complicated the clean narrative I'd been telling myself. That evening I'd stayed late at the office, going through emails and trying not to think about the expression on Victoria's face. Around 7 p.m., I'd heard a sound from outside my office. Crying. I'd gotten up and found Victoria still at her desk, head in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Victoria?" She'd looked up, startled, and quickly wiped at her eyes. "I'm sorry. I thought everyone had left. I'll go." "What's wrong?" "Nothing. It's none of your concern. You're crying at your desk. That makes it my concern as your employer." She'd laughed bitterly. "My employer. Right. Connor, do you have any idea how humiliating this is? Coming to work every day for the man whose life I destroyed? Having to serve coffee to your clients? Listening to people whisper about me, about what I did, about how I deserve this?" "You do deserve this," I'd said. But there was less conviction in my voice than there should have been. "I know I do. I know I hurt you. I know I was terrible to you. I know all of it." She'd looked at me then, really looked at me, and I'd seen something I'd never seen before, genuine remorse. "But Connor, I'm trying. I'm showing up every day, doing the work, accepting the consequences of what I did. How long do I have to pay for my mistakes?" The question had hung in the air between us. How long was enough? A year? Until the divorce was final? Forever? I hadn't had an answer. So I'd said, "Go home, Victoria. We'll talk on Monday." She'd gathered her things and left, and I'd stood there in the empty office, wondering if Angela had been right, wondering if I'd crossed from justice into cruelty, wondering if the satisfaction I'd felt at watching Victoria serve me coffee was worth the hollowness I was starting to feel every time I looked at her broken expression. The weekend gave me too much time to think. I'd spent Saturday morning at the office, working on strategy documents for the next board meeting, but my mind kept drifting back to Victoria crying at her desk. I'd built this elaborate revenge. I'd engineered her humiliation with the same precision I'd used to build Streamline OS. I'd wanted her to understand what she'd lost, to feel the consequences of her contempt. Mission accomplished. She understood. She was paying for her mistakes every single day. So why did I feel worse instead of better? Sunday afternoon, I'd gone to visit my parents, something I'd been avoiding since the divorce proceedings started. My mother had known something was wrong the moment I'd walked in the door. "Connor, what's going on?" she'd ask over coffee in their small kitchen. "You look exhausted. Just busy with the company. Don't lie to your mother." "I read the articles about you and Victoria, about the divorce, about her working at your company." She'd set down her coffee cup and looked at me with the expression that had always been able to cut through my defenses. "Honey, what are you doing? What do you mean?" "I mean, I understand you're hurt. I understand she betrayed you. But making her work for you, Connor, that's not who you are. She made me feel worthless for years, Mom. She cheated on me. She told her friends I was mediocre, unambitious, never going to amount to anything. And all the while, I was building a company that's now worth $25 million. She needs to understand what she threw away." My mother had reached across the table and taken my hand. She already understands. The question is, what does this revenge cost you? Does it make you happy? Does it make you feel better about yourself? Or does it just make you feel hollow? I don't know, I'd admitted. 3 months ago, this plan seemed perfect. Now, I don't know. Connor, your father and I are proud of what you've built. The company, the success, it's incredible. But we're most proud of the man you've always been. Kind, thoughtful, someone who built others up instead of tearing them down. Don't let what Victoria did change that about you. Her words had stayed with me through the rest of the weekend. By Monday morning, I'd made a decision. Victoria had arrived at exactly 9 a.m., as she'd done every day since starting. She'd looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept well. There were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Victoria, can you come to my office when you're settled?" I'd asked. Of course. 5 minutes later, she'd appeared in my doorway, professional mask in place. "You wanted to see me? Sit down, please." She'd sat in one of the chairs across from my desk, posture rigid, waiting. "I wanted to talk about Friday, about what you said." "Mr. Hayes, I shouldn't have Connor," I'd interrupted. "When it's just us, you can call me Connor. The formality is starting to feel ridiculous." She'd blinked, surprised. "All right, Connor. Victoria, I've been thinking about this situation, about having you work here, about what I'm trying to accomplish with all of this. Are you firing me?" she'd asked, and I'd heard fear in her voice, real fear, because losing this job would mean losing the settlement, losing the lifeline she was clinging to. "No, I'm not firing you. But I think we need to talk honestly about what's happening here. Why I hired you. Why you accepted. What this is really about." She'd looked down at her hands. "You wanted me to understand what I threw away, what I destroyed. You wanted me to feel every day what it's like to work for someone I underestimated. Yes, that's exactly what I wanted. And you do understand that now, don't you?" "Yes," she'd whispered. "I understand completely. Victoria, look at me." She'd raised her eyes, and I'd seen they were already wet with unshed tears. "I'm not saying I forgive you for what you did. The affairs, the contempt, the years of making me feel inadequate, that's not something I can just erase. But I'm also starting to realize that making you suffer every day isn't making me feel better. It's just making both of us miserable." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to modify our arrangement. I'll still give you the $50,000 bonus at the end of the year, but I don't want this to be about humiliation anymore. I want you to actually learn something here, to grow, to become better." She'd stared at me, confusion and hope warring on her face. Why? Because my mother reminded me this weekend that I'm supposed to be better than this. That revenge might feel satisfying in theory, but in practice, it just makes me someone I don't want to be. "Connor, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve your kindness or your mercy. I destroyed our marriage. I made you feel worthless when you were building something incredible. No, you don't deserve it. But I deserve to be someone who can move past this. So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to keep working here, but I'm going to actually teach you things. About business, about startups, about the skills you'll need to rebuild your life after this year is over. I'm going to treat you like an actual employee, not like someone I'm punishing." "Why would you do that?" "Because holding on to anger is exhausting. Because I've proven my point. Because being the bigger person might actually make me feel better than orchestrating your humiliation has." Victoria had broken down, then really broken down, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Connor. I'm so sorry for everything. You deserve better than how I treated you. You deserved a partner who celebrated your ambition instead of crushing it. I was awful to you, and I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself." I'd handed her a tissue from the box on my desk. "Then don't. Forgiving yourself is overrated. Just be better. Learn from this. Become someone who doesn't treat people the way you treated me." She'd nodded, wiping at her eyes. "I will. I promise I will." "Good. Now, we have a team meeting in an hour. I need you to prepare the materials therein, the shared drive under Q3 strategy. Can you handle that?" "Yes." "Thank you, Connor. For this. For not destroying me when you could have. I didn't do this for you," I'd said honestly. "I did it for me. Now go get ready for that meeting." After she'd left, I'd sat at my desk feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Not happiness. Not forgiveness. But relief. The weight of carrying so much anger had been crushing me. and I hadn't even realized it until I'd started to let it go. The revenge had been satisfying, but mercy felt better. The weeks that followed brought an unexpected shift in the dynamic between Victoria and me. We weren't friends that was too much to expect, but we developed something like a functional professional relationship built on mutual respect rather than resentment. I'd started actually mentoring her, teaching her about software development, startup operations, venture capital. She was smart, I'd always known that, and she absorbed information quickly. She'd begun contributing ideas in team meetings, suggestions that were often quite good. What if we added a feature that lets clients customize their dashboard? She'd propose during one product planning session. Everyone has different KPIs they care about. Giving them control would increase engagement. The development team had looked at me, waiting to see how I'd respond to my ex-wife offering product suggestions. I'd considered the idea on its merits. "That's actually solid," I'd said. "James, can you look into the development timeline for something like that?" Victoria had smiled a real smile, not the brittle professional mask she'd been wearing, and I'd felt something loosen in my chest. In early September, 2 months after she'd started working at Streamline OS, something significant happened. Victoria's father, Preston Ashcroft, had shown up at the office unannounced. I'd been in a meeting with potential clients when Hannah had knocked on the conference room door. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a Preston Ashcroft here demanding to see his daughter. He's being insistent." I'd excused myself from the meeting and gone to the lobby, where Preston was standing with Victoria, his face red with anger. "Can't believe you're allowing this humiliation," he was saying. "Working as some sort of secretary for the man you divorced? It's degrading. It's beneath you." "Dad, please," Victoria had been saying, her voice strained. "This isn't the place, Mr. Ashcroft," I'd interrupted, stepping forward. "I need to ask you to lower your voice. We have clients in the building." Preston had turned to face me, and I'd seen pure contempt in his eyes. You did this. You engineered this entire situation to humiliate my daughter. Your daughter made her own choices. I'm simply providing her with employment." "Employment? You're making her serve you coffee like some kind of servant. You're parading her around as a trophy of your revenge. It's pathetic." "Dad," Victoria had said sharply. "Stop. Just stop. Victoria, you don't need this job." "I'll cover your expenses until you find something appropriate, something that doesn't involve working for your ex-husband." "I'm not taking money from you," Victoria had said, and I'd heard steel in her voice I'd rarely heard before. "I made mistakes. I'm paying for them. And yes, it's humiliating, but it's also teaching me things I never learned. About work, about consequences, about not taking people for granted." Preston had looked stunned. "Victoria, no, Dad. You need to go. I have work to do, but please leave. Now." Preston had looked between his daughter and me, clearly trying to process this new version of Victoria who was standing up to him. Finally, he'd turned and walked out of the office without another word. After he'd left, Victoria had stood in the lobby, shaking slightly. "You okay?" I'd asked. "I've never told my father no before. Never stood up to him." "He's always controlled everything, my choices, my life, my sense of what was acceptable." She'd looked at me then. "I married you partly to rebel against him, you know. He didn't think you were good enough, which made you attractive to me. But then I spent our marriage trying to make you into something he would approve of, trying to mold you into the kind of successful he valued. And when I didn't become that person fast enough, you looked elsewhere. Yes, I'm not proud of it. But Connor, these past 2 months, working here, seeing what you actually built, I realize now that you were always ambitious, just not in the ways my father or I recognized. You were ambitious about building something meaningful, rather than just accumulating status symbols. That's very introspective, I'd said, not entirely without sarcasm. I've had a lot of time to think, a lot of therapy, a lot of nights wondering how I became someone capable of treating another person the way I treated you. We'd stood there in the lobby for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. "Get back to work," I'd said finally. "We have that investor call at 2 p.m. "Yes, boss," she'd replied. And there'd been the faintest hint of humor in her voice. The investor call that afternoon had gone exceptionally well. We'd been discussing expansion plans with a firm that wanted to help us open an East Coast office. Victoria had taken detailed notes, asked intelligent questions, and afterward had prepared a summary document that was thorough and insightful. "This is good work," I'd told her, reviewing the document. "Really good, thank you. I'm actually enjoying this, learning about the business side of tech, understanding how startups work. I never had a career before. I just sort of existed in the spaces between my father's expectations and your income. What would you want to do? If you could choose anything?" She'd thought about it. "Maybe venture capital. Or startup advising. Something where I could help other founders build companies. Use what I'm learning here to actually contribute something meaningful. That's achievable. You're smart enough. You just need to build a track record, which is what I'm doing here, right? Building experience, learning the industry, proving I can do more than just spend someone else's money, right?" Something had shifted between us in that conversation. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the beginning of understanding. Recognition that we'd both been trapped in roles. We'd never examined me as the mediocre husband, her as the trophy wife, and we'd both been complicit in maintaining those roles until everything had exploded. That evening, I'd stayed late at the office again, working on projections for the board meeting scheduled for the following week. Around 8 p.m., I'd emerged from my office to find Victoria still at her desk. "Why are you still here?" I'd asked. "I wanted to finish organizing the board meeting materials. I know how important this presentation is." "Victoria, it's 8 p.m. Go home. I don't mind staying. Honestly, my apartment is depressing. At least here, I feel like I'm doing something useful." I'd hesitated, then made a decision that surprised me. "Want to grab dinner? There's a Thai place around the corner. We could discuss the board meeting strategy." She'd looked shocked. "Are you sure that's appropriate? It's two colleagues having a working dinner. Nothing inappropriate about it." "All right." "Yes. Let me grab my bag." We'd walked to the restaurant in companionable silence. Once we were seated and had ordered, Victoria had said something that caught me off guard. "Connor, can I ask you something? And will you be honest with me?" "Depends on the question." "Do you still hate me?" I'd thought about it. Did I? 3 months ago, the answer would have been an unequivocal yes. Now, no, I'd said finally. "I don't hate you. I don't trust you. I don't think I could ever be married to you again. But hate? That takes too much energy, and I'd rather spend my energy on building the company." "That's fair." She'd paused. "For what it's worth, I don't blame you for what you did. The revenge? Making me work for you, I deserved it. I deserved worse, honestly. Nobody deserves to be humiliated, Victoria. Not even people who hurt us. Then why did you do it? Because I was angry. Because I wanted you to understand what you'd thrown away. Because I wanted you to see that the man you dismissed as mediocre was actually capable of extraordinary things." I'd met her eyes across the table. "But somewhere along the way, I realized that making you suffer wasn't making me feel better. It was just making me someone I didn't like. So you decided to be merciful instead. I decided to be practical. Carrying anger is exhausting. Moving forward is easier." Our food had arrived then, and we'd spent the rest of dinner discussing the board meeting, the company's expansion plans, the challenges of scaling a startup. It was the most normal conversation we'd had in years, maybe ever. We were just two people talking about work, without all the baggage of our failed marriage weighing down every word. Walking back to the office afterward, Victoria had said, "Thank you for dinner, and for everything you're teaching me. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful for it." "You're welcome. Now go home and get some rest. The board meeting is going to be intense." She'd driven away, and I'd stood in the parking lot of Streamline OS, looking up at the building that represented everything I'd built, and I'd felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, not for reconciliation with Victoria, that ship had sailed and sunk, but hope that maybe I could move forward without being defined by what she'd done to me. That maybe I could build a life that was about more than just proving people wrong. The revenge had been satisfying, but building something new felt better. The board meeting the following week was a turning point not just for Streamline OS, but for my understanding of what I actually wanted from my professional and personal life. The board consisted of me, Angela Warren from Pinnacle Ventures, 2 other investors from our series Around, and 2 independent board members with startup experience. We met quarterly to review performance, discuss strategy, and make major decisions about the company's direction. This meeting's agenda included something significant: the proposal to open an East Coast office and the budget approval that would require. Victoria had prepared meticulously for the meeting. She'd organized all the financial projections, printed and bound the presentation materials, and ensured that every detail was perfect. She'd even anticipated questions the board might ask and prepared backup slides addressing them. During the meeting itself, I'd presented the expansion strategy, walking through our rationale for opening a New York office, the projected costs, the expected return on investment. The East Coast market represents approximately 40% of our target customers, I'd explained. Right now, we're serving them remotely, but having a physical presence would allow us to close deals faster, provide better customer service, and establish Streamline OS as a truly national company. One of the board members, a woman named Florence who'd founded and sold 2 successful startups, had asked pointed questions about the timeline and resource allocation. How do you plan to staff the New York office without depleting your current team? We'll hire locally for most positions, but I'll need to send some of our core team members there initially to establish the culture and processes. Have you identified who those team members would be? I glanced at my notes prepared by Victoria and had been surprised by what I'd seen. She'd included a section analyzing each executive team member's strengths and recommending the best candidates for the New York leadership roles. It was insightful analysis, better than what I'd prepared myself. I have some thoughts, I'd said, improvising based on Victoria's notes, but I wanted to get board input first. Florence, given your experience opening satellite offices, what would you recommend? The meeting had continued for another hour, with spirited discussion about growth strategy, risk management, and competitive positioning. Throughout it all, Victoria had sat in the corner taking notes, occasionally getting called on to pull up specific financial data or find reference materials. At one point, Angela had addressed her directly. Victoria, you organized all these materials? Yes, with Connor's direction. They're excellent, very thorough. Have you considered a career in operations or startup leadership? Victoria had looked surprised by the question. I'm still learning. This is all fairly new to me. Well, you're a quick learner. Connor, you should think about giving her more responsibility. This level of organizational skill is rare. After the meeting ended and the board members had left, Victoria had started cleaning up the conference room. I'd stayed to help, and we'd worked in silence for a few minutes before she'd spoken. Angela's comment caught me off guard. Do you really think I could do more here? You've been doing more. The board materials, the analysis of team members for the New York office, that was well beyond what I asked for. I just wanted to be helpful. You were. But Victoria, Angela's right. You have skills that we could use, not just as an assistant, but in an actual leadership role. She'd stopped cleaning and looked at me. Are you offering me a promotion? I'm saying that when your year is up, when you've earned your $50,000 bonus, you could stay if you wanted. Not as my assistant, but as something else. Operations manager maybe, or chief of staff. Someone who helps coordinate between departments and ensures nothing falls through the cracks. Connor, I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. You have 7 months left on your contract. By then you'll have enough experience to know if this is something you want to pursue. And if it is, we can talk about what a permanent role might look like. Why are you doing this? Why are you helping me build a career when I destroyed your marriage? Because you're good at this. Because the company could benefit from your skills. And because I'd paused, surprised by what I was about to say. Because somewhere in the past few months, I stopped seeing you as my ex-wife and started seeing you as a colleague. Someone with potential who's working hard to prove herself. Victoria had blinked rapidly, fighting back tears. Thank you. That means more than you know. Don't thank me yet. If you stay, you'll have to earn it. You'll have to prove you can lead teams, manage complex projects, and handle the pressure of a fast-growing startup. It won't be easy. I understand. And Connor, I want to. I want to prove I can be more than what I was. Then let's make it happen. Over the next several months, I'd gradually increased Victoria's responsibilities. She'd started managing the scheduling for our executive team. Then she'd taken over coordination for our quarterly business reviews. By December, she was effectively functioning as my chief of staff, managing projects that touched every department. And she was excellent at it. The team had noticed too. At first, there'd been awkwardness about Victoria's presence. Everyone knew the story, knew why she was there. But gradually, as she'd proven herself competent and hardworking, the whispers had died down. People had started coming to her with questions, trusting her to solve problems, respecting her judgment. In January, exactly 6 months after she'd started, we'd hit a major milestone. Streamline OS crossed 100 enterprise clients and $400,000 in monthly recurring revenue. We were officially on track to reach profitability within the year. To celebrate, I'd taken the entire team out for dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. It was the first social event we'd done as a company, and it felt significant, a marker of how far we'd come. During dinner, James had raised his glass for a toast. To Connor for building something incredible, and to everyone here who's helped make it happen. We're changing the consulting industry one client at a time. Everyone had cheered and clinked glasses. Victoria had been sitting at the far end of the table, and when our eyes had met across the room, she'd smiled a genuine, unguarded smile that reminded me of why I'd fallen for her in the first place, years ago, before everything had gone wrong. After dinner, as people were leaving, Victoria had approached me. "Can we talk?" "Of course." We'd walked to a quiet corner of the restaurant's lobby, away from the rest of the team. "Connor, I wanted to tell you something. My divorce from you was finalized last week. I'd known it was coming. Catherine had kept me updated on the final paperwork, but hearing Victoria say it out loud had made it real in a way it hadn't been before. How do you feel about that?" I'd asked. "Relieved, sad, grateful, all of it." She'd paused. "The settlement was fair. The house went to you, I kept my car, we split the furniture. And I got the $50,000 you promised if I completed the year. You still have 5 months left on your contract, I know, but the divorce being final changes things. I wanted to ask, do you still want me to stay? Now that we're officially divorced, now that the revenge is complete, do you still want me working here?" I thought about it, did I? The original plan had been about making Victoria understand what she'd lost. That goal had been accomplished months ago. So why keep her around? "Do you want to stay?" I'd asked. "Yes. I love this work. I love being part of building something real. I love feeling like I'm contributing instead of just existing. But Connor, I'll only stay if you genuinely want me here. Not out of obligation or some extended revenge fantasy, but because you think I add value to the company. You do add value, significant value. The team respects you. You're good at what you do. And honestly, I don't think of this as revenge anymore. I think of it as giving both of us a second chance. Not as a couple, but as people who can work together despite our history. Then I want to stay, not as your assistant anymore, but in whatever role makes sense for the company." "Chief of Staff," I'd said, effective immediately. "We'll draw up a new contract with a real salary, $95,000 to start, with performance bonuses. You'll manage cross-departmental projects, coordinate with the executive team, and help me scale the company's operations." Victoria's eyes had widened. "That's generous. More than generous. It's what the position is worth, what you're worth. This isn't charity, Victoria. This is business. Thank you. I won't let you down. I know you won't." We'd stood there for a moment, the ghost of our marriage hanging between us but no longer suffocating us. We'd both moved on. Both become different people. Both learned from our failures. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria had said. "Do you think you'll ever forgive me? Really forgive me? Not just stop being angry?" I'd considered the question carefully. "I don't know, but I think I'm getting there. Forgiveness isn't an event, it's a process. And somewhere in the past 6 months, I started that process. Where it ends up, I can't tell you yet. That's fair. And Connor, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for being a better person than I deserved. You're welcome. Now let's get out of here. We both have early meetings tomorrow." We'd walked out of the restaurant together, professional colleagues leaving a team dinner, and I'd realized something important. The revenge that had started this whole arrangement had transformed into something else entirely, something better. I'd set out to make Victoria understand what she'd lost. Instead, I'd given both of us a chance to become better than we'd been. That felt like a victory worth having. Spring arrived with warmth and new possibilities. Streamline OS continued its explosive growth. We'd hit $600,000 in monthly recurring revenue and had officially opened our New York office in March. We'd also hired our 50th employee and were being courted by acquisition-minded tech companies willing to pay upwards of $100 million. I wasn't interested in selling. Streamline OS was my creation, my proof that I was more than Victoria had thought, more than anyone had expected. But it was gratifying to know the option existed. Victoria had fully transitioned into her role as Chief of Staff and was thriving. She'd taken over management of the New York office launch, coordinating between teams, managing logistics, and ensuring the satellite office maintained Streamline OS's culture and standards. You should go to New York for the office opening party, she'd suggested during one of our weekly one-on-ones. The team there needs to see leadership support. I was planning to. Are you coming? If you think it would be appropriate. Victoria, you coordinated the entire launch. Of course you should be there. We'd flown to New York together on a Thursday in April, staying in separate hotels but traveling to the new office together. The space was beautiful open floor plan, modern furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. It looked like the kind of place successful tech companies operated from. Because that's what we were now. A successful tech company. The opening party had been attended by the New York team, several local clients, and a handful of investors who'd wanted to see our expansion firsthand. I'd given a short speech about Streamline OS's mission and vision, and Victoria had been introduced as our chief of staff who'd made the expansion possible. She'd received genuine applause. Not polite acknowledgement, but real appreciation from people who'd worked with her and respected what she'd accomplished. After the party, Victoria and I had grabbed dinner at a quiet restaurant in Midtown. "This feels surreal," she'd said over wine. "A year ago, I was being served divorce papers. Now, I'm chief of staff of a company worth $100 million, traveling to New York for office openings. How did this happen? You worked for it. You earned it. I know, but Connor, a year ago you hated me. You had every reason to destroy me. Instead, you gave me an opportunity to rebuild. Why?" I'd thought about her question. I'd been asking myself variations of it for months. "Because destroying you wouldn't have fixed what was broken in me," I'd said finally. "I'd spent years feeling inadequate because of how you treated me. Making you suffer might have felt good temporarily, but it wouldn't have actually healed that inadequacy. What healed it was building something successful, something meaningful. You working for me was just a bonus that you engineered very carefully." True. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about revenge and started being about something else. About proving to myself that I could succeed. About building a company I was proud of. About becoming someone I actually liked. And do you? Like who you've become? Most days, yes. I'm successful, but I'm not cruel. I'm ambitious, but I'm not ruthless. I built something extraordinary, but I did it without destroying the people around me. That feels like the right balance. Victoria had smiled. "You're a better person than me, Connor." "You always were. I just couldn't see it when we were married, because I was too focused on comparing you to some imaginary standard my father had created. What about now? Can you see it now?" "Yes. And I see something else too. I see that the man I dismissed as unambitious was actually the most ambitious person I've ever known. You just measured ambition differently than I did. You were ambitious about building something meaningful rather than just accumulating status symbols." That's exactly right. We'd finished dinner and walked through Manhattan, enjoying the spring evening. At some point, Victoria had said something that surprised me. "Connor, I'm seeing someone." I'd felt a complex emotion, not quite jealousy, but something adjacent to it. "Oh? His name is Owen. He's an architect. We met at a professional development seminar 3 months ago. He's kind, funny, and he has no idea who my father is or how much money he makes. He just likes me for me." "That's great, Victoria. Really, I'm happy for you. Are you? Honestly? Yes. You deserve to be happy. And you deserve someone who appreciates you for who you actually are, not who they want you to be. What about you? Are you seeing anyone?" "I've been on a few dates. Nothing serious. I'm still figuring out who I am. Post-divorce, post-revenge, post-everything. Once I have that figured out, maybe I'll be ready for a real relationship. You'll find someone amazing. Someone who recognizes how extraordinary you are from the beginning." We'd walked in comfortable silence for a while longer, and I'd realized something important. I'd forgiven Victoria, not because she'd earned it through her work at Streamline OS, though that had helped, but because holding on to anger had been exhausting and letting it go felt like freedom. The revenge I'd planned had been satisfying, but forgiveness felt better. Summer brought more changes. Streamline OS crossed the $1 million monthly recurring revenue milestone in June, a number that would have seemed impossible when I'd started building the company in my evenings and weekends 2 years earlier. We'd also been approached by several acquisition-minded companies, each offering increasingly large amounts. The latest offer had been $150 million, a number that would make me wealthy beyond anything I'd imagined growing up as the son of a teacher and a nurse. Catherine had advised me to seriously consider it. "Connor, that's life-changing money. You could retire, start another company, do whatever you want. Why keep grinding?" But I wasn't ready to sell. Streamline OS was more than just a company. It was proof of what I could build. Proof that Victoria had been wrong about me. Proof that I was more than anyone had expected. Also, I genuinely loved the work, loved solving problems, loved building teams, loved watching clients succeed using software I'd created. In July, I'd promoted Victoria again, this time to Chief Operating Officer. It was a role that put her in charge of all daily operations, reporting directly to me but with significant autonomy. "Are you sure about this?" she'd asked when I'd offered her the position. "COO is a major role. The team needs to respect whoever fills it. They already respect you. You've earned it. But Connor, people will say you're only promoting me because we were married, because you feel guilty. Let them say it. You and I both know the truth. You're the best person for this job. You understand our operations better than anyone except me. You've managed the New York launch flawlessly. You've built relationships with every department. You're ready for this." She'd accepted, and the promotion had been announced internally to universal support. The team had thrown her a small celebration, and I'd watched her laugh and talk with colleagues who genuinely respected her work. This was Victoria's redemption arc, from cheating wife to respected executive. From country club socialite to accomplished businesswoman, she transformed herself as completely as I'd transformed my career. In August, on what would have been our 11th wedding anniversary, Victoria had knocked on my office door. "Do you have a minute?" "Of course. What's up?" She'd sat down across from my desk, looking nervous. "I wanted to tell you something," Owen proposed. I said yes. The news had hit me harder than I'd expected, not with jealousy or regret, exactly, more with a sense of finality. Victoria was moving on completely, building a new life with someone who wasn't me. "Congratulations," I'd said, and I'd meant it. "When's the wedding?" "Next spring. Small ceremony, just family and close friends." "Connor, I wanted to ask you something, and you can absolutely say no, but would you consider coming, not as my ex-husband, but as, I don't know, as someone who gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve it?" "Victoria, I don't think that's appropriate." "I know. You're probably right. I just wanted you to know you'd be welcome. That despite everything, I consider you one of the people who changed my life for the better. I'll think about it." After she'd left, I'd sat in my office thinking about her request. It was absurd, really. Going to your ex-wife's wedding to another man, watching her promise forever to someone else after she'd broken those promises to you. But it was also meaningful. A recognition that we'd both moved past our failed marriage. That we'd found a way to work together despite our history. That we'd transformed something toxic into something functional. I'd called Catherine that evening. "Should I go to Victoria's wedding?" I'd asked. "Absolutely not. That's insane." That's what I thought. But Catherine, these past 15 months have been about me learning to let go of anger, to forgive, to move forward. Going to her wedding feels like the ultimate expression of that. Proof that I've truly moved past what she did to me. Or proof that you're a glutton for emotional punishment. Maybe. But I think I'm going to go. Not for her. For me. To prove to myself that I'm completely over our marriage and ready to move forward. You're a better person than I am, Connor Hayes. I don't know about that, but I'm trying to be. September brought another milestone. Streamline OS officially became profitable. We'd been generating massive revenue, but between hiring, expansion, and growth investments, we'd been spending almost as much as we'd made. Now, for the first time, we were in the black, sustainably, significantly profitable. The board had been thrilled. "This changes everything," Angela had said during our quarterly meeting. "Profitable SaaS companies at your scale can command premiums in any acquisition scenario. Connor, you're sitting on a gold mine. I'm not interested in selling. Not even for $200 million?" I'd paused. $200 million. An amount that would make my parents comfortable for life. Let me fund scholarships for kids like I'd been. Create generational wealth for any family I might have someday. "Not yet," I'd said. "Maybe someday, but not yet. I'm still enjoying building this." Angela had smiled. Fair enough. But when you're ready, the offers will only get bigger. After the board meeting, Victoria had approached me with a concerned expression. Are you okay? You seem distracted. Just thinking about what Angela said. About selling. Would you consider it? If the offer was right. Maybe. But Victoria, if I sold Streamline OS, what would happen to you? To your career? I'd figure it out. Connor, you can't make decisions about the company based on what happens to me. This is your creation. You have to do what's right for you. I know. But you've built something here too. You've proven yourself as a real executive. I wouldn't want you to lose that because I decided to cash out. That's kind of you. But if you did sell, I'd be fine. I have experience now, connections, a track record. I could find another COO position somewhere. Or maybe start my own consulting business. She'd smiled. You taught me that it's possible to build something from nothing. I could do it too. You could. You're capable of more than you ever realized. Because you gave me the chance to discover that. Connor, whatever happens with Streamline OS, I want you to know working here, learning from you, rebuilding my life after I destroyed it, this has been the best thing that ever happened to me. Better than our marriage, honestly. Because this time, I earned it. I wasn't just coasting on someone else's money or success. That means a lot. I mean it. Thank you for being the kind of person who could look past revenge and see potential instead. Fall brought unexpected developments. In October, a major tech company, one of the Silicon Valley giants, made an offer to acquire Streamline OS for $250 million. It was an absurd amount of money. Life-changing money. Money that would solve every financial concern I'd ever had, and then some. I'd called an emergency board meeting to discuss it. Connor, you need to seriously consider this, Angela had said. This is the kind of exit most founders only dream about. You built this company in 2 years. $250 million is extraordinary. But what about the team? What happens to them? The acquiring company is committed to keeping everyone on for at least a year, with retention bonuses and equity grants. Most of your key people would do very well in this scenario. What about Victoria? The board had exchanged glances. Florence had spoken up. Connor, Victoria has been excellent as your COO. But you can't make a decision this big based on what happens to one employee, even if she is your ex-wife. She's not just one employee. She's been instrumental in our growth. Then negotiate terms that protect her position in the acquisition. But don't turn down $250 million because you feel guilty about your divorce. The board had voted unanimously to recommend I accept the offer pending final negotiations. I'd asked for a week to think about it. That evening, I'd gone to visit my parents again. My mother had made her famous pot roast, and we'd sat around their small dining table, the same table where I'd eaten family dinners throughout my childhood, talking about the offer. That's a lot of money, honey, my mother had said. What would you do with it? I don't know. Invest it, I guess. Maybe start another company someday. Make sure you and Dad are comfortable. Fund scholarships for kids from backgrounds like mine. Those are all good plans. But Connor, what do you want? Not what should you do, but what do you actually want? I'd thought about her question. What did I want? I want to know that the work I've done matters, I'd said finally. That Streamline OS isn't just a company I built and sold, but something that continues to help people. That the team I've put together stays together and keeps innovating. That what I built has a legacy beyond just making me wealthy. Then those are the terms you negotiate for, my father had said. He'd been quiet through most of the dinner, but when he spoke, it was always meaningful. Son, you've proven everything you needed to prove. You've shown Victoria and her father and everyone who doubted you that you're capable of extraordinary things. Now you get to decide what's next. Just make sure you're making that decision for the right reasons. I'd spent the week thinking about my father's words. About what I actually wanted, not what I should want, not what would prove anything to anyone. On Friday, I'd called the acquiring company's CEO. I'm willing to discuss the acquisition, I'd said, but I have non-negotiable terms. My entire team stays on with guaranteed positions for 3 years, not 1. Victoria Hayes, my COO, becomes VP of Operations for your consulting software division with full authority and a substantial equity package. And I stay on as president of the Streamline OS division with autonomy over product direction for 5 years. Those are aggressive terms. They're the terms under which I'll sell. If you can't meet them, I'm not interested. There had been silence on the other end of the line. Then, let me talk to our board. I'll call you back Monday. Monday had arrived with a response. They'd accepted my terms. All of them. The acquisition would close for $250 million. My team would be protected. Victoria would get a major promotion, and I'd maintain control over Streamline OS's product vision. I'd immediately scheduled a company-wide meeting to announce the news. The office had been buzzing with speculation when people started filtering into the conference room. I'd waited until everyone was seated before beginning. Thank you all for being here. I have some news that's going to change things significantly. I'd paused, looking around at the faces of people who'd believed in Streamline OS, who'd taken risks to join an unknown startup, who'd helped build something extraordinary. I've accepted an offer to be acquired. Effective in 90 days, Streamline OS will become part of TechCore Industries. The room had erupted with reactions, shock, excitement, concern. I'd held up a hand for quiet. I know you have questions. Let me address the major ones. First, everyone keeps their jobs. Not just for 1 year, but for 3 years, with guaranteed positions and competitive compensation. Second, key leadership will receive equity grants in the parent company, which is publicly traded and worth tens of billions. Third, I'll remain as president of the Streamline OS division with full autonomy over product decisions. What about the company culture? Someone had asked. Will we lose what makes Streamline OS special? That's my top priority, maintaining what makes us unique while gaining the resources of a much larger company. We'll have more budget for development, more resources for sales and marketing, access to TechCore's massive client base. But we'll keep our team, our values, our way of working. The meeting had lasted 2 hours, with questions about the acquisition process, timeline, and what would change. By the end, the team had seemed cautiously optimistic. After everyone had left, Victoria had lingered behind. You negotiated terms that protected me, she'd said. VP of Operations. That's a huge role. You've earned it. And honestly, I couldn't sell Streamline OS to a company that wouldn't recognize your value and give you an opportunity to keep growing. Connor, I don't know how to thank you. You've given me everything a job when I needed it, an opportunity to learn, a chance to rebuild my career. And now this. I owe you everything. You don't owe me anything. You earned this through your work, your dedication, your growth. I just gave you the opportunity. What you did with it, that was all you. She'd hug me then, the first physical contact we'd had in over a year. It was brief, professional, but genuine. Thank you. For everything. For being a better person than I deserved. You're welcome. Now go celebrate. Call Owen, tell him the news. You just became a VP at a Fortune 500 company. That's worth celebrating. After she'd left, I'd sat alone in the empty conference room, processing what had just happened. I'd sold my company. The company I'd built in secret. The company that had been my revenge against Victoria. The company that had proved I was more than anyone had thought. And I felt good. Not conflicted, not uncertain. Just good. Because I'd negotiated terms that protected my team, that gave Victoria an opportunity she'd never have gotten otherwise, that ensured Streamline OS would continue to grow and innovate. The revenge that had started this whole thing, making Victoria work for me. Making her serve me coffee, making her understand what she'd lost. It had transformed into something better, into building something meaningful, into helping someone grow beyond who they'd been. That felt like a victory worth more than $250 million. The acquisition closed in January, and the process was smoother than I'd expected. TechCore had been professional, respectful of Streamline OS's culture, and genuinely interested in maintaining what made us successful. On the day the transaction finalized, I'd received a wire transfer for $250 million. $250 million. An amount I couldn't quite process, even seeing it in my bank account. I'd immediately called my parents. Mom, Dad, I need you to retire. Connor, we're not ready to retire, my mother had protested. We both have years left in our careers. I know, but I want you to have the option. I'm setting up trusts for both of you. Enough that you can retire tomorrow if you want. Or keep working because you love it, not because you need the money. Honey, that's too generous. It's not generous. It's appropriate. You supported me my entire life. You encouraged me to pursue my education even when it meant taking on debt. You believed in me when I wasn't sure I believed in myself. Let me do this." They'd both cried, and I'd felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction. This was what wealth was supposed to be, for not just accumulating status symbols, but taking care of the people who'd sacrificed for you. I'd also set up a scholarship fund at my alma mater, full rides for students from working-class backgrounds studying computer science or business. I'd endowed it with $10 million, enough to fund scholarships in perpetuity. The rest of the money I'd invested conservatively, with a financial advisor who specialized in helping people who'd experienced sudden wealth. I'd bought a nice house, nothing ostentatious, just a comfortable place that felt like home. I'd upgraded my car to something reliable and well-made. But mostly, I'd focused on my new role at TechCore. Being president of the Streamline OS division meant I still had control over the product, still got to work with my team, but with significantly more resources than I'd had as an independent startup. Victoria had thrived in her new role too. As VP of Operations for TechCore's consulting software division, she'd been responsible for coordinating between Streamline OS and 3 other recently acquired companies. She'd been working closely with TechCore's executive team, impressing them with her organizational skills and strategic thinking. "I love this work," she told me during one of our weekly syncs. "It's challenging in ways I never experienced before. Every day I'm learning something new, solving problems I didn't even know existed. You're doing excellent work. TechCore's CEO mentioned you specifically in his last board update, said you've been instrumental in integrating the acquisition smoothly. That means a lot. Connor, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. Thank you for believing in me when no one else did, for giving me a chance to become more than I was. You're welcome. But Victoria, you need to stop thanking me. You earned everything you have now. Your success is yours, not mine." She'd smiled. "Fair enough. No more thank yous. Just gratitude. Acknowledgement that you changed my life in ways I'll never be able to repay." In March, I'd received an invitation to Victoria's wedding. It was a simple card, elegant but understated, very different from the elaborate affair our wedding had been. I'd RSVP'd yes. Natasha had thought I was crazy. "Connor, you're going to watch your ex-wife marry someone else? That's masochism." "It's closure," I'd replied. "It's proof that I've moved on completely, that her happiness doesn't diminish mine. If you say so, just don't blame me when you're crying into your whiskey at the reception." The wedding had been in late April, in a small garden venue with maybe 50 guests. Victoria had looked beautiful, radiant in a simple dress, genuinely happy in a way I'd rarely seen her during our marriage. Owen had seemed like a good man, kind, attentive, clearly in love with Victoria. He'd welcomed guests personally, including me, with genuine warmth. "Connor, thank you for coming," he'd said when I'd arrived. "Victoria told me about your history, about how you helped her rebuild her life. I'm grateful for what you did for her. She did the work herself. I just gave her an opportunity." The ceremony had been brief and heartfelt. Victoria and Owen had written their own vows, promising to support each other's dreams, to communicate honestly, to build a partnership based on mutual respect. They were the kind of vows Victoria and I should have written, the kind that acknowledged marriage was work, required commitment, meant choosing each other every day. During the reception, Victoria had approached me at one of the quiet moments between toasts. "I'm glad you came," she'd said. "I'm glad I came too. You look happy, really happy." "I am." "Owen is. He's everything I didn't know I needed. He sees me for who I actually am, not who he wants me to be or who my father expects me to be. Just me. That's what you deserve. What everyone deserves. Connor, can I tell you something? You taught me how to recognize that. By showing me respect even after I'd hurt you, by valuing my work even when you didn't have to, by helping me rebuild even though I didn't deserve it, you showed me what real partnership looks like. I'm able to have a healthy relationship with Owen because you taught me what healthy looks like. I'm glad. Truly. You've become someone better than who you were, Victoria. That's all anyone can ask for. What about you? Are you seeing anyone?" "Not seriously. I've been on dates, but nothing's clicked yet. I think I'm still figuring out who I am post everything. Once I have that sorted, maybe I'll be ready for something real. You will be. And whoever you end up with will be incredibly lucky." "You're one of the best men I've ever known." It just took me too long to realize it. She'd hugged me then, a real hug, and I'd felt the last remnants of anger and hurt dissolve completely. I'd forgiven her, not because she'd earned it, though she had, but because holding on to anything else would have poisoned the future I was trying to build. I'd left the wedding feeling lighter than I'd felt in years. The revenge that had started everything, making Victoria work for me, making her understand what she'd lost, it had transformed completely. Into forgiveness, into growth, into both of us becoming better than we'd been. That evening, I'd gone home to my new house and poured myself a glass of expensive whiskey, the kind Victoria had always said I should appreciate more. I'd sat on my back porch, looking at stars and thinking about the journey of the past 2 years. I'd started with hurt and anger. I'd built a company partly to prove Victoria wrong, partly to show her what she'd lost. I'd hired her as my assistant with the explicit goal of humiliating her, making her serve me coffee while I ran the empire I'd built. But somewhere along the way, revenge had transformed into something else. Into mentorship, into giving someone a second chance, into proving that success wasn't about destroying the people who hurt you, it was about building something meaningful despite them. Victoria had said I wasn't ambitious. She'd been spectacularly wrong. I was ambitious, just not in the way she'd recognized. I was ambitious about building things that mattered, about treating people with respect, about being someone I was proud to be. The man I'd become successful, yes, but also kind, forgiving, focused on growth rather than revenge. That was the real victory. Not the $250 million or the company or the satisfaction of watching Victoria serve me coffee. The real victory was becoming someone better than the man she'd left. 2 years after the acquisition, I sat in my office at TechCore, reviewing the quarterly reports for the Streamline OS division. We'd doubled our client base. We'd expanded internationally. We'd launched 3 new product features that had been industry-leading, and I was content. Not ecstatic, not constantly thrilled, just solidly, deeply content with my work and my life. Victoria had been promoted again, this time to Senior VP of Operations, responsible for all of TechCore's consulting software products. She'd become one of the most respected executives in the division, known for her strategic thinking and people management skills. We'd had lunch the previous week to discuss a potential collaboration between our teams. It had been professional, friendly, completely devoid of the tension that had characterized our early months working together. "Can you believe it's been 3 years since I started working at Streamline OS?" she'd asked over salads. "Barely. It feels like a lifetime ago and yesterday simultaneously. Connor, I wanted to tell you something. Owen and I are expecting a baby, due in December." The news had made me smile genuinely. "Congratulations. That's wonderful. Thank you. And I wanted to tell you personally because you've been such an important part of my journey. Without you giving me that opportunity 3 years ago, I wouldn't be where I am now. I wouldn't have this career, this confidence, this life. You would have found your way eventually. Maybe it would have taken longer, but you would have figured it out. Maybe. But I'm grateful it happened the way it did. I'm grateful for the revenge that turned into mentorship. I'm grateful for the humiliation that turned into growth. I'm grateful for everything, even the painful parts." "Me too," I'd said, and I'd meant it. Because the painful parts, the discovery of her affairs, the months of anger, the elaborate revenge I'd planned, all of it had led to this, to me building a successful company, to her discovering capabilities she'd never known she had, to both of us becoming better versions of ourselves. The revenge had been satisfying, but the growth had been better. Now, sitting in my office 2 years later, I thought about the quote, worthy line I'd said to Victoria that first day she'd worked at Streamline OS. "You're going to understand what you threw away." She had understood. Completely. But I'd understood something too. I'd understood that being underestimated was a gift. It gave me the freedom to build without pressure, to succeed without expectation, to become extraordinary without anyone watching. I'd understood that revenge was satisfying but ultimately empty unless it transformed into something more meaningful. I'd understood that success wasn't about accumulating wealth or status symbols or proving people wrong. It was about building something meaningful, helping others grow, and becoming someone you were proud to be. My phone buzzed with a text from a woman I'd been dating for the past 6 months, an engineer at another tech company who'd known nothing about my history with Victoria or Streamline OS when we'd met. She was smart, funny, ambitious, in healthy ways, and completely unlike Victoria. "Dinner tonight? I'm making that pasta you love." I'd smiled and typed back, "Perfect. See you at 7. This was the future I'd been building toward. Not revenge, not vindication, not proof of anything. Just a good life, built on honest work, meaningful relationships, and the understanding that success was measured not by what you took from others, but by what you built for yourself and those around you." Victoria had said I wasn't ambitious. She'd been wrong. I'd been ambitious enough to build a $250 million company, ambitious enough to transform revenge into mentorship, ambitious enough to forgive someone who'd hurt me deeply, ambitious enough to help someone grow beyond who they'd been. That kind of ambition, the kind that built rather than destroyed, that lifted rather than crushed, that was worth more than any amount of money or any satisfaction from revenge. I'd started this journey wanting Victoria to hand me my coffee at work, to understand what she'd lost, to pay for her betrayal. She had done all of those things, but I'd gained something more valuable in the process. I'd learned that the best revenge was becoming someone so genuinely successful and content that you forgot you even needed revenge. That was the real victory. Not watching her serve me coffee, but building a life so good that eventually it didn't matter if she served me coffee or not. I was Connor Hayes. My wife had said I wasn't ambitious. Now she worked for the same company I helped run, and we'd both become better people in the process. That was a story worth living.